Hey everyone, it is Monday, November 16, and I hope you guys are doing well. COVID cases in Ohio are rising at an exponential rate, so I encourage you all to bundle up, stay home, wear a mask, and just be thoughtful about how many people you spend your time with so that we can stop the spread of this thing that has changed our lives in ways that I cannot recall ever happening in my lifetime. I just watched last week's video on Huck Finn, and it's pretty heavy. If you recall, and I hope you guys are watching these videos, but if you recall from the book and from the video, we talk about how Huck has found himself in a cabin, locked in a cabin by his father of all people, and is gravely in danger, so he runs away. And when he runs away after staging his own murder to look like he died, he finds Jim, who is his neighbor's slave and his friend, has run off, and they decide to run off together. Chapter 16 sort of gets in his head where Huck is balancing the pros and cons of snitching on Jim. And we read this in class with some of the hybrid students, and it's brilliant. I mean, it's terrible in that some of the things that he says, but it's brilliant because you can see that in the mind of this 13-year-old boy, he's trying to gauge his concept of right and wrong personally with the concept of right and wrong that he's been taught by the adults in his life and by the world he lives in. And so at the point where he can snitch on Jim, he's trying to weigh it out, and we're not sure if he's going to or not. If you read, you saw that he didn't. He decided not to. Strangely, he feels guilty about that. And the book explains that. We're all glad he didn't do it at the end, but it's important for us to try to understand how our sense of right and wrong is personal, but it's also public. It's shared. The things that we do and that we consider right or that we consider wrong are often taught to us or at least performed around us so that we will either adhere to them or will be forced to one day reject them. So it's a really heavy chapter and a heavy subject, especially considering that he's juggling the morality of slavery. Ultimately, if you think about a 13-year-old boy having the freedom of a man, Jim, in his hands and at his discretion, that is frightening. I mean, any 13-year-old boy or girl at the time probably would have done something different than what Huck did, which is not to revere him, because this contributes to our white savior narrative that we kind of saw with Frederick Douglass and the statues of Abraham Lincoln. But it is to understand the complexity of the way Huck is thinking and the way he's feeling about the world he has been thrust into. And you can't trust the adults around him to boot. So I love this book for that reason. The next chapter that we look at here is a little bit lighter, and we're going to be looking at what we call literary technique. So literary technique is the strategy that an author or a writer uses to try to convey ideas to the reader in a clever way. It's skill, it's demonstration of skill. Whenever you see a basketball player do the spider dribble or cross someone over or a fadeaway shot, all of these are techniques in the game that assist them and show a certain degree of proficiency and schooling with the sport. This is no different with literature. And in chapter 18, we're going to read about Colonel Grangerford. And he's a very strange, particular looking man that Twain describes in a very interesting way. So I'll turn towards our Google Classroom page. And if I toggle over to classwork, you'll see Imagery due November 23. Right here I have the excerpt. Guys, this is Roman numerals. X is 10, V is 5, 1, or I is 1, rather. Okay, and it begins right away with this description of Colonel Grangerford. Okay, and this is a much simpler assignment than what we did last week. All I want you guys to do is to separate the traits that you read about into his physical display and embodiment and his personality, or his sort of like abstract traits, the things that you can't touch or see but you can feel. And sometimes there's like a crossover where a certain personality trait is demonstrated through a physical trait, like lowered eyebrows, or like mean eyes or something. And I actually think that's what they talk about. So I want you to document all of these here. These page numbers, I apologize, are for when we read it in person in the green book that I showed you last week. Then I want you to use Google to search for a picture of a person that you think he looks like. Now listen, you can just Google Colonel Grangerford, right, and attach that below. That's kind of boring. Like, I guess you could do that, but that's like not using your imagination. There was like this avatar website I used to use and have students design it. If I find that, I'll attach it. You don't have to use that. If I find that, I'll attach it to the assignment. But you don't have to use that, but something like that. Like, look for something that embodies what you've written down as a physical trait, or even a personality trait if you think you can see it in the picture. And that's it for this week. We're just going to do a little bit of the more formal components. So just so you guys remember, part of what we do is the meaning. We look for theme and we look for messages. And the other part of what we do is we read to look at skill, right? You can watch a basketball game, just to go back to the analogy, for the coach's approach to winning the game, his strategy. Or you can just watch it and try to acknowledge the techniques of the individual players and how they play their each position. We've spent a lot of time looking at strategy, winning strategy, like we did last week for Mark Twain. But, well, obviously Mark Twain, but with the right and wrong chapter, sorry. But this week we're looking more at the technique. So I hope you guys can appreciate that. It's a little bit less heavy, I think, but it does require a little bit of work from you all. I hope you're doing well. Again, stay safe. And man, I hope we get through this virus stuff, and hope you guys are all keeping healthy. Take care. Miss you.